Welcome back to Hello guys. Welcome back to Hostinger Academy. My name is Victoria and today we will quickly learn about what is a domain name and how does it work. So let's not waste any more time and let's get to it. If you're a beginner and starting your own personal blog or online business, you might have heard that you need a hosting for your website. But what's important that you also need a domain name. Every website that you visit consists
Welcome back. I hope you had a good holiday if you celebrate Thanksgiving.
Hey everyone, this is Kamran and today we're going to talk about the DNS or the domain name system. DNS is one of those topics that anyone who develops for the web should know about. It is a broad topic, so I'm going to divide this lesson into two videos. In this lesson we're going to talk about what is DNS and how does it work, and the next one is going to be about the DNS records and how to debug the issues with the help of dig, traceroute and NSLOOKUP. So what is DNS? Before we learn about the DNS, we need to know what is internet. And before we learn about the internet, we need to know what is a network. Network is just a group of computers and other devices that are connected to each other. So for example, if at your home you have a printer, you have a laptop and a desktop, and all of these are connected to each other, these are all forming a network. Moving on, we have internet, which is a global network of networks. So for example, if you at your home have a home network and then your friend has a home network of his own, and then he has another friend which has a home network, and all these networks are grouped together to form a bigger network. So internet is similar to that, just a global network of all the networks. Now on the internet, if you have to communicate with some other device, you need to know how to find it. To find the device on the internet, we use something called the IP address. So each device on the internet has an IP address which has a numeric format, and it looks like this, and it is used to locate that device on the internet. And same goes for the websites that you visit on the internet. The IP address of the server where that website is hosted is used to load the website in the browser. But how does it work? Because we normally put the domain name in the browser. How is the browser able to find the IP address of the server? The answer to that is the browser uses something called a DNS, which helps us get the IP address from the domain name. So the browser sends the DNS the domain name and it gets back the IP address. And once it has the IP address, it can go on the network and hop from different routers till it reaches the server, and then it loads the website from there. Okay, now that we have got the high level understanding of the internet and how it works, let's look at the DNS and see how it works internally. So first of all, we have the browser. So the user enters the website in the browser and tries to open it. As we know that the first step is DNS resolution, so the browser needs to find the IP address of the website. First of all, the browser will look at the cache and see if it has the IP address of the website from any previous visits. If it doesn't find it there, then it will look at the DNS cache and see if we have the IP address there. And if it is also not there, then it will look at the host file to see if we have a mapping from the domain name to the IP address defined there. If it is able to find the IP address in any of these places, it will load the website from there, and it will not do any of the next steps that we will mention now. If it is not able to find the IP address in any of these caches or the host file, the next step is the recursive DNS servers. This is normally your ISP or internet services provider, which provides you the internet. Now it doesn't know anything about the domain name, but it has the caches from any previous visits. So it is possible that some other user might have visited the same website and it might have the cached IP address. If it is able to find the cached IP address, it will just return the IP address from here, and it does not have to go to the next step. And if the IP address is not found here, then the next step is the root DNS servers. Now root DNS servers also do not have the IP address information for the domain.
In this tutorial, we'll discuss why
University instructor Dave Gray gets
and when to use semantic HTML elements over divs. Alright, so I just have a couple of examples for you, but first of all, why do we even want to use semantic tags instead of divs? Well, first of all, it's easier to read and scan the HTML if it has been properly structured with these semantic tags, and I'll show you why in a second. It's also better for SEO. It makes it easier for those search engines like Google to come to your website and properly index all the content that's on there, which in turn will make it more likely that you rank higher in their search engine results, right? So you get more traffic. And it's also better for screen readers or assistive technology to properly, categorize and index what's going on your websites, right? So it's also better for accessibility. These are the three main reasons for why we want to use semantic tags. So let me actually just give you an example of what a very typical HTML boilerplate would look like. So this is currently basically an empty HTML file. Now, globally speaking, you're gonna have a header usually, a main section, and a footer section. And so these are already semantic tags because you could also use divs, right? You could use divs. Div stands for divider, right? You could use that. Practically, they would work the same, but in practice, if you want to use semantic tags, this is what you're gonna get. So header is usually for introductory content, the logo, like the introductory links. The main is really for the dominant content on the page. And the footer is for, maybe some other links like terms and conditions, privacy policy, not really important stuff going on there. So in the header, then typically you also have some kind of nav. So the nav is really for the most important links on the page, or the most important navigation on the page. Typically people structure it like this. So you're going to have a list of links. So in a list we have LIs, that's going to be quite nested here. And then in here you're going to have the actual anchor tag. Right, so usually you're gonna have a bunch of links here, and then maybe you also have like a logo, right? The logo could be just an image, let's say. Right, so you would have an image in the header, and then you would have a nav. Right, so it's quite nested here, but this would be a pretty typical semantic structure in the header. Then in the main, the dominant content on the page, usually you're gonna have a bunch of sections, as it's called. Right, so in practice, a lot of people would use div, but it's better to use section, and I'll show you some practical examples on real-world websites in a second. But usually the main consists of a bunch of sections, right? And then in the section you can have a heading, right? So maybe an H1 or H2, and you would say something like about us, maybe, or maybe some kind of a benefit section. Let's do that. It's a bit more realistic. And then perhaps a paragraph section with a bunch of words. Right, that would be a section, and then you would have another section, benefits. Instead of benefits, we would have something like how it works, right? And maybe some paragraph with a bunch of text. So in practice, what you see a lot of people do is they use div here, but it's better to use section. So why section instead of div? I'll show you that in a second on real-world access websites. But in practice, what you also have in the main sometimes is have some kind of sidebar or some related content that's not really something that should get the focus, but you could have something like an aside in here as well. That's also what you see sometimes. So this could be for a sidebar or something like that. You're also going to see the article tag sometimes. It's a bit trickier, this one. This one is more suitable for if you can pull out this content and place it somewhere else and it wouldn't lose any meaning, right? So this is a bit more rare. And then in the footer, usually you're gonna have a bunch of links, maybe some text, but here you would also use that nested structure again, except now you wouldn't use the nav. Right, so nav is typically more common in the header because this is actually meant as a really important set of navigational links or navigational section. If it's really important, it probably shouldn't be in the footer. Right, so here you wouldn't see the nav tag. Right, so this is a really common semantic setup that you would see. And now we're going to look at some actual websites to see how they've done it, and I'll show you some examples for those more rare tags as well, like article and aside. Alright, so this is the Stripe website, but honestly I could have picked any landing page because they're all quite similar. So we can inspect here and we can see how they've marked up their HTML. So at the top we indeed see a header here, right? So here they have a logo, they have a bunch of important links, and they have this sign in button, right? So that's a header for them. They have a bunch of divs in here because sometimes you need to use a div simply for stylistic purposes. Let's see if we can find a good example here. Doesn't look like it. Maybe we'll find a good example of that later. But here we have a section. So this is what they call the hero section, right? Really the thing you look at first when you come to the website. This is a section because all of this is related to each other. It's like a way to introduce their company or their product. It's all related to each other. This heading and this text and this graphic. It's all it all has the same semantic purpose, and that's why it should be a section and not just a div, right? So if it would not be related to each other, and you would only need some kind of element just for layout purposes, from stylistic purposes, you would use a div, right? Then we get to this section here, and let's see. So they used a section tag again, and this is actually just a bunch of images actually, right? These images, well, what it represents is the type of companies that use, right? So this is like credentials for them, and because each image here belongs to that same semantic purpose, they all should be in a section tag and not in a div, right? Because a section means that the content in there is related to each other. It has the same semantic purpose, so it's better to use the section tag. Now, why not use the article tag here? Well, an article tag means that I should be able to pull this out of here, place it somewhere else, and it would still have the same meaning, or it would still be clear what it means. But if I would take these images out of here and I would put it somewhere else on a different website or somewhere else, it would just be a collection of images. It wouldn't mean anything. It wouldn't mean the same as it means here, which is that these companies use Stripe, right? So this only makes sense in the context of the Stripe website, and therefore this is not an article tag, but a section tag. Alright, so then if we go down, you're gonna see a bunch of other sections they have that showcase why people should use, right? So they want to convince the viewer to use Stripe. So here, let's see, this section, it has to do with an overview of their product, and it's a section tag because all of this in here is related to an overall semantic purpose, right? So this heading is not some standalone random piece of text, right? It's a heading that describes everything else that's also part of this, and so it's all related to each other, right? That's really what it comes down to with section versus div, right? So this is a section, this is a section, and usually it's quite easy to identify them on these landing pages, but this is a really typical example of sections versus divs. All right, now let's take a look at the MDN website, the developer.mozilla.org. So if you go to one of their articles, you can see that we have the actual content, we have some header on the top, and then we also have this sort of sidebar. So let's see how they have marked this up. So here we can see this is the main content. You're only gonna have one main tag on your page because it's for the most dominant content on the page. And they've used an aside tag for this sidebar here, right? And actually you could make the argument that the aside never should be in the main because it's not really part of the dominant content, right? So you could make that argument. And then in the main, we see an actual article tag here. So here they actually chose article instead of section. So article is actually a bit more like there's an additional requirement. That's how you can think of it. So section just means that everything in there is related to each other or it has the same semantic purpose. With article, the same has to be true, but I also need to be able to take this out of here and put it somewhere else, and it should still make sense. And that's actually the case here. I could take out all of this text here, you could put it somewhere else, but it would still be the same, it would still have the same value essentially, right? So it would still be clear what it is, and therefore it should be an article tag. Another example would be if, for example, they had some kind of job posting here, right? Maybe they have some kind of job post. That would also be a good candidate for an article tag because I could take that job post out of this website, I could put that somewhere else, maybe on like a jobs website, and it would still make sense there, right? I could put it on any other website and it would still make sense. That article tag is self-contained. It explains itself. You can look at it, you can read it, you can consume it, and it's clear what it is, what its purpose is, what it represents, and therefore you want to use an article tag. Now this is quite rare. The aside and article tags, you don't use that much. You don't use it often. In most of your projects, you're going to use the section tag and a bunch of divs. Okay, so here they also have some kind of navigation here. So this is maybe interesting to look at as well. So here they use the section for that. Actually, they use an aside for this overall piece, and then they use a nav tag again, and that's right. So you're not only going to see a nav in the header, but also sometimes outside of there if it's important set of navigation, which it is, right? So this Like a table of contents is an important piece of navigation, so you could opt for using the nav tag there. This all may seem a little bit confusing and overwhelming. In practice, you know, if you didn't use nav here, but you used just an UL perhaps, or maybe a section instead of an aside, all of that is generally fine in practice. You know, it doesn't.
Straight to the point, and he will take you from knowing nothing to understanding advanced HTML concepts.
Hello and welcome to 4 hours of HTML tutorials and instruction. This video is made up of 10 tutorials for learning HTML that build upon each other much like the chapters of a book. Throughout the lessons in this video, I will mention links being available in the description below. I've compiled all of these links into one GitHub resource that you will find in the description. Hi, I'm Dave Gray, and I'm the creator of these HTML tutorials. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel for more tutorials like this one. You can also follow me on Twitter, and if you're feeling generous, you can even buy me a cup of coffee. A quick thank you to Bo at Free Code Camp for sharing this video, and to everyone at Free Code Camp for providing such an outstanding resource that helps people learn how to code for free. It's truly my honor to contribute this video. Let's get started learning HTML with Chapter 1. What is HTML? HTML is an acronym that stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And Hypertext Markup Language, HTML, is the most basic building block of the web. It defines the meaning and structure of web content. And hypertext refers to links that connect web pages to each other, and that can be within a single website or from one website to another. Overall, HTML uses markup to annotate text, images, and other content for display in a web browser, and you can see an example of some of these markup elements here. But before we begin creating a web page and using these markup elements, we need to get the necessary tools. So let's start with a web browser. If you don't have one, or if you're curious what I will be using in this series, I'll be using the Google Chrome browser, and you can download that at google.com/Chrome. So if you don't have that and want to use that, go ahead and download and install now, and then come back to the tutorial. Also, I will be using an extension, and we go to chrome.google.com/webstore to get extensions for the Chrome browser. And there, if you want to use the extension that I'm going to use, it's called Dark New Tab. And you can press enter to search for that. And once you've completed your search, you'll see Dark New Tab offered by Keller, which is the one that I have added, and you can see added here. I'll click on that, and once you're inside the page for Dark New Tab, you should have an install button here. Since I already have it installed, this is now a remove button for me. What this does is when you open a new tab in the browser, it uses a dark page instead of a light page, and I use dark mode whenever possible, so I prefer that. If you see me open a new tab in this development series, you'll probably see a dark tab like this one. From there, we need to get a code editor, and the industry standard right now, and what I prefer to use, is Visual Studio Code. Again, you can use other code editors to write your HTML code. But if you go to code.visualstudio.com, you'll be able to download Visual Studio Code for free. And there you can download for Windows if you're on Windows like I am, or you can click other platforms, and it's also available for Linux and Mac OS. So now would be a good time to go ahead and download Visual Studio Code and install your code editor, and go ahead and open that up and then come back to the video. Okay, I am now assuming you have installed Visual Studio Code and have opened it up, and you may see something like this, or you may see a welcome screen. What you need to do is create a folder on your computer, and we will put our files inside that folder. So if I go to the File menu and choose Open Folder, you can see once this pops up what folder I am in, the HTML course folder in Windows, and then I've created an 01_lesson folder. So if I highlight that and select the folder, I am now inside that folder and ready to create my first HTML file. So if you see the file tree over here on the left and it's currently empty, if you don't click this icon in the top left, which is the File Explorer, and that will hide or show this File Explorer, we're going to create the plus button, or click the plus button here for new file, and create a new file. Now we'll type index.html, as that is always the file name that is expected to launch. Contains all the things I am learning how, if I could spell how, to, and it looks like I'm extending the page. So in Visual Studio Code, I'm going to press Alt-Z in Windows to make sure the text continues to wrap. And then I'll say all the things I am learning how to create as I learn HTML. There we go. Now after that, of course, you still need to close the meta tag and Control S to save. And again, I got the words to wrap. Let's go to the View menu. If you scroll all the way down, you can see word wrap is Alt-Z. It may be something different if you're on Mac or Linux, so you might want to check the View menu under word wrap if you want your words to wrap and not just extend forever to the right here. Now we've added more description about our page. Now this information could be picked up in a search engine or some other service that wants to learn more about our web page. However, let's go ahead and put something in the head where we will notice the change when we go back to the browser. And that is to add what is called a fave icon. And we can do that with a link element. Let me use lowercase once again. And inside of the link element, we'll have several attributes. One is the REL, which stands for relate or relation. How does this relate to the web page? And here we're going to provide an icon. After that, we need an href. This refers back to HTML, that stands for hypertext. This is a hypertext reference, so we're referencing a resource, and here we're going to reference a file that I have now put inside of our folder that is called html5.png. And if I click the File Explorer over here, you can see I've now added an image file that's a .png file, html5.png, and you can download this image from the resources. And you can see it's a small little icon for the HTML5 logo. So I'll close that. I'm going to click the file browser to have that disappear again, so we see this. Now we have one more attribute to add, and that is the type. What type of resource is this? And here we'll say image/x-icon. And now we can save this, and I'm going to go ahead and minimize the code window. And now if we look at our web page in the browser, notice we have an icon up here. My first web page now has our little fave icon beside the title, and that's what we added here in the head by adding the fave icon with a link element. Now we won't add any more here today, but this is the same area where we would link to CSS files and even JavaScript files and other resources that we pull in from the web. So the head is a very important part of the page, even though we don't see the content of the head inside the body of the page. And I said we wouldn't link to anything else here today, but since we do have this default CSS to make our page a dark mode, if you added this, and once again, this was optional. If you prefer the white page with dark text, you didn't need to add this. And we had this style element here to hold the CSS in the head. Semantic meaning, I guess, and created an LI there, and I'll use Control X to GitHub, go ahead and bring Visual Studio, and Control C to copy everything for each of the right here for the. Now let's put our this wrap to the Alt use yet. The Visual Studio Code reform the same value, primary proper 3 hours. Now but highlight and it will wrap based on the content. It doesn't change the appearance at all, but it adds semantics to our table. Likewise, there is a T-body element for the table body. So I'm going to once again highlight the closing tag, press Control that has planning, and let's do the same. We've got but that does have that shift, very similar to ARM, not just R. Those Welcome to your HTML project for beginners. You'll stop. We've got to click it. It takes. We can work to click over your HTML and list this. Back over about LTS, which will not only all walk through and create. There we know we need the HTML. I need lowercase, or I prefer lowercase. And then we need, of course, name, because of course that's what our title will be. Correctly, the little taco shop in the title. And here we're an icon, fave icon that we have. Image/x dash icon. And now let's add one more link tag. And now the href will put this, and then we want style.css. And after that we can click. Now I could use. We're going to have little shop, each element, list, going to link, and then in B, Mac page, move the next image of that. We're not completed that. Let's put a saying, have a add C that has to save. Okay, while we're on the hour, one of these files, same as far as the author and the content, but when we get to description, taco shop title. Instead of the little taco shop here, let's put LTS hours. Since it's not the home page, we'll just go ahead and abbreviate little town for the little taco shop, refer to the little taco shop, and a little bit little taco shop, and then hours after the link number taco shop where home, and so let's now we're not going to use the tacos and a drink, same between and interesting place to our little town. Now let's add just a little more flavor to this paragraph, so we can put a strong element, and then we'll put love of tacos inside that so it has some emphasis. And now we also want to add some to type search me to just as we've got taco shop, put an D, and that's within just table row, and the table row is going to have
Welcome to the complete HTML. Welcome to the complete HTML.